Tartan International Raceway just outside Krugersdorp in Gauteng, and the scene for round 4 of Super Series 98, South Africa's own unique form of stadium off-road racing. The circuit had been modified slightly to make it a little more challenging for the competitors and attractive to spectators, and most seemed to like it. Most of the competitors in both the motorcycle and car categories are regular participants in the South African Motocross or Off-Road Championship, but they relish the opportunity to display their skills where spectators are close by. In the junior motorcycle category, Gareth Swanepoel had been repeating his dominant form of last season by taking all 3 previous rounds, but the battle for second in the championship remained extremely close. Swanepoel traditionally doesn't get a good start, but in the 3rd race of the day it was different as the former world junior champion on his Elna Fox Kawasaki shot to the front to take the whole shot from Ryan Newton on his Suzuki. Swanepoel had already won both the previous races here at Tartan International, and he was clearly in a mood for another clean sweep. Jaco Wolmerans on his Panasonic Russell Campbell Racing Kawasaki quickly slotted into 2nd position, ahead of Michael Koch on a Suzuki, while Newton had dropped back in front of Lawrence Mahoney on his Honda. Swanepoel immediately started to open up a gap, seeking out the fastest line through the sweep in front of the main grandstand. But behind him, the fight was on. These little 80cc machines need to be powered all the way to get the drive out of the corners. And with the growth of junior motocross racing in South Africa, more and more riders have been gaining the necessary experience over the last year or so. Mahoney had finished 3rd and 4th respectively in the last 2 races, but he was getting pressure from Carl Stegen on his Yamaha, who had a 5th and a 2nd. Gavin Lowe on a Suzuki was also in the picture. Swanepoel was extending his lead over Wolmerans, Koch, Newton, Mahoney, Stegen and Lowe, and they knew that only a mistake would lead to a change in the lead. Michael Koch had had a good day so far, finishing 2nd in the 1st race and 3rd in the 2nd, so he was determined not to lose contact with the 2 riders in front of him. Behind him, Ryan Newton was starting to feel the pressure from Jaco Swanepoel, and as he took a very tight line into the right-hand sweep, he hit a rut and went over. Off-road racing is a hard school, and one learns very quickly that once you fall, you need to get up and back into the saddle as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Swanepoel was riding a steady and mature race, but Wolmerans had taken advantage of Newton's crash and had moved up to 2nd position. He was on a mission to try and catch his old foe, so to speak. Before this race, Michael Koch had been in 6th position in the championship, 9 points ahead of Wolmerans, so these two had their own little private battle to settle. 4th, but still under pressure from Stegen, was Mahoney, and these two were trying to outwit each other at every corner. Stegen had had a 5th and a 2nd under his belt, and both he and Mahoney were fighting for 3rd in the championship. The race had settled into a pattern by now, with Swanepoel controlling the gap between himself and Wolmerans, Koch trying to get closer in the battle for 2nd, and Stegen and Mahoney fighting it out for 4th. With so many different possible lines through each corner, it was a question of finding your opponent's weak spots and trying to force an error. Leading a battle such as this one is always more difficult than following, because the leader has to pick his lines and braking points, while the follower only has to react. Further back, Gert Pretorius on his Honda was defending his 12th position against Chris Muller, also on a Honda, with Jaco Murray on his Kawasaki bringing up the rear. He was also learning the hard way. No surprise as far as the leader was concerned, with Gareth Swanepoel having opened up a substantial gap. But up into 2nd position now was Ryan Newton on his Suzuki, ahead of Michael Koch, with Jaco Wolmerans down in 4th. Lapping the back markers were Mahoney in 5th and Stegen in 6th. Swanepoel was well on his way to another victory, but as the race progressed, the next 4 positions changed. Swanepoel made it 3 in a row on the day, extending his championship lead, but Koch moved up to take another 2nd place ahead of a recovering Wolmerans, Mahoney and Stegen. With one more event to go, Swanepoel was certain of retaining his title this year.
Got the whole shot. The first lap, I had people right up there with me, but afterwards I pulled the gap and it was a pretty easy race.
In the Pro Quad category, Jacques Struik had a comfortable but by no means safe lead over defending champion Christo van der Merwe and Brandon Martin.
I'm well prepared, as always, and I would like to win today, yeah, definitely. The track is very nice, a bit different, a bit tight, but yeah, we're going to go out and give it a full go.
The start of race 2, with race 1 having been won by Struik from Martin and Van der Merwe. The championship leader made a great start to take the whole shot, but Evan Hutchison, more well known for his exploits in the super quads, got past as the pack emerged from the first 3 corners. Third behind Struik was Martin, and a terrible start for Van der Merwe in 4th. With the track having just been wetted, the riders needed to be very careful not to be caught out in the slippery conditions. But Martin threw all caution to the wind as he made a charge on Struik's second position. He was well aware of the fact that Struik was a hard man to get past, and he knew that if he stood a chance, the early part of the race was his best opportunity. Great pictures as Martin lined up and got past Struik for second position, making it a Yamaha 1-2 at the front of the field. Hutchison was leading on the Line-X version, Martin in second, with Struik on a Jojo Tanks Honda. The top 3 had closed up, and Hutchison made a mistake, getting the power on too early, but he recovered well and closed the door on Martin, who tried to dive through on the inside. The order now was Hutchison from Martin, Struik in third, ahead of Van der Merwe on the Joburg Yamaha Banshee. Then the second Jojo Tanks Honda of Francois Coetzee and David Parkinson on the exclusive Spares Yamaha. Riding these machines with their rear-wheel drive can be pretty tricky in slippery conditions like these, and one needs to be very careful not to put the power on too early. It's a fine balancing act, quite literally, with the riders having to use their body weight to distribute the center of gravity as effectively as possible to get through the corners quickly. Coetzee recovered well from what easily could have been a spin without losing his race position. Back to the front, and Hutchison was still under pressure from Martin, but Struik's quad was struggling for grip with his left rear tyre suffering from what looked like a slow puncture. He was praying that the tyre wouldn't go down too quickly and that he'd be able to maintain his third position. Having won the first race, he needed to maintain at least a podium position to have a chance of finishing high up overall for the day. Had a chance at the front as Martin was in front of Hutchison, having forced Hutchison wide in the previous corner. Martin immediately started to pull away, with Struik maintaining contact despite his ill-handling Jojo Tanks Honda. Martin, Hutchison and Struik were clearly the class of the field as they pulled away from 4th place man Christo Van der Merwe, who'd not been able to recover from his bad start. Martin was ahead of the reigning champion on the points ladder before this race meeting, and another good result would open that gap even further, so he was going as hard as he could. Struik's left rear was still deflating, and the championship leader was having his hands full controlling the quad that was jumping and sliding around like a bucking bronco. Struik was clearly just riding to maintain his position, and it was a difficult situation for him to be in. He had to go as fast as possible without going over the top and losing his position, and the points that go with it. Van der Merwe, on the other hand, must have seen him struggling and was going flat out to try and catch him. The defending champion obviously not happy with his current position. Martin has burst on the quad scene this year, finishing 3rd overall in the first round at AA Kyalami in February, 2nd at Tarleton in April, and 3rd at AA Kyalami in May. Having finished 2nd in the first race here at Tarleton, and with Struik struggling in 3rd, Martin was in a solid position for his first overall victory this year. Lapping the back markers, the leader had no problems, but Hutchison slowed down, which allowed Struik to close in. Struik's incredible natural talent and aggressive riding style had enabled him to maintain contact despite the slow puncture, and he was almost in a position to challenge Hutchison for 2nd place. Hutchison had made his name in the less modified super quad category over the last year or so, but this year he'd been racing in some of the pro quad events as well. With better grip, the Line-X Yamaha rider was always going to be able to maintain his 2nd position, and when Struik's left rear tyre climbed off the rim, both knew it was all over. Struik had no choice but to start dropping back, so this took the pressure off Hutchison, and it allowed Van der Merwe, Parkinson and Coetzee to pass the stricken championship leader one by one. Victory then for Brandon Martin, ahead of Hutchison, Van der Merwe, Parkinson and Coetzee, and a Yamaha clean sweep on the podium. Martin won the 3rd race as well to take overall victory for the day.
Yeah, the first heat I had a bit of bad luck. Got held up in the start, but in the second heat went a bit better. And the third heat just as good.
Back to the two-wheelers now, and Ryan Hunt has had a good run of results in the open motorcycle category. One